everyone, and welcome to the Evolve with Emily show YouTube channel. The best way to support the show on this YouTube channel is to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment, and or share it with a friend. I hope that you guys enjoy this episode, and whichever way you choose to support the show, I just wanted to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys so much. I hope that today's message and episode brings some bit of positive change to your life. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Evolve with Emily show. I am your host, Emily Hayden, and for today's episode and today's guest, we have Trish Gunning. She has served in the military for 11 years. She's done a few overseas tours. She currently works as a training manager. She's a certified snowboard instructor, which I really hope to get lessons from her someday. She enjoys snowboarding, mountain biking, rock climbing, camping. She's a believer in Christ, and she's working on deepening her relationship with God. She also is about to be an Evolve X graduate. She has gone through the entire program right at the last week or so this point. So she has a lot of insight to share with you guys on what it's like to, first and foremost, make the decision to evolve in your life, make the decision to do something that's uncomfortable, something that's really difficult. And she's really understood the power of overcoming those really difficult moments and overcoming moments where previously maybe she would have beat herself up, or previously maybe she wouldn't know how to give herself grace, right? So I've seen her really go through this transition and this mindset shift. And, I told her last time we spoke, I was like, you get it. Like, you just get it. And so I knew that when I was looking for people to interview for the Evolve with Emily show, that I should definitely interview her because, again, I think it's, amazing to interview people that you guys might look up to or might follow on Instagram. But I think there's a lot of power in interviewing people that you guys can relate to, maybe the people that haven't made social media and fitness coaching and that kind of thing like their entire life, but yet they're the ones being dedicated. They're the ones behind the scenes doing the work, putting in the nitty gritty and doing it for themselves and doing it for their personal growth. So with all of that, let's welcome Trish Gunning to the show. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So, okay, I want to dive right in. What made you decide that it was time for you to evolve in your life?
So I've been following you for, I don't even know how many years. I did one of your programs in 2018. And then the end of 2021, I was in a relationship that was not evolving me, I guess you could say. And I kind of felt drawn towards kind of making a drastic change, I guess. And I had heard about 75 hard quite a few times. And then one day I was like, oh, I should just start now. And so I started that at the end of 2021. And I feel like that unintentionally set me up to start the Evolve X program. I had heard about your program, but never really considered it. And then, in the beginning of January, I was like, that just felt like the right next step. So I just didn't really question it, and I just went for it, really.
That's awesome. So what were you kind of feeling, and what was your mindset going into the program? Like, what was it that you were seeking, right? Because I hear from you that it was like, it felt like the next step for you. But did you come into the program kind of with this preset, like, okay, I really hope to get this out of my evolving journey?
Yes. I feel like I have a lot of good habits, and I seek personal development on my own, but I felt like I haven't got to the point that I wanted to get to yet. So I just felt like I needed an outside source to make that difference. And again, I didn't really question it. I was just like, this feels right. You have to do something different that you haven't been doing to get to where you've never been.
Yes. That's so smart and so full of wisdom, because that's something that I practice a lot in my life, right? Like when I'm not getting what I need out of something, or when I feel like I have a blind spot, I go and I find somebody who can find that blind spot. Maybe it's a mentor, maybe it's a coach, maybe it's a therapist. I always share this, but I remember the first time I went to therapy, and he, not the first time, but the first time, like, kind of in the last couple of years. And he was like, why are you here? And I was like, I'm here because my life is great. And I was like, I'm not aware to what I'm not aware to. And I want to become aware to that. Like, I don't know what the blind spot is. And normally I'm really good at picking it out myself. Like I can pick out like, oh, this is what I need to work on. And I couldn't figure it out. So it absolutely is just so smart to get that outside, resource, that outside mentorship, coaching, training. It's such a valuable tool. Even in my martial arts that I've kind of picked up now, when I realize that like I need a little bit more from class, I just book a one-on-one, and I'm like, okay, I need like direct attention, because I know that you're the same in the sense that like you just want to do the absolute best that you can. You want to be really good at everything that you do. And part of that is getting resourceful when you don't know what to do.
Right. Yeah, and I just felt like I needed that, definitely needed an outside pressure. And with the way the program is set up, it felt like there would be like no option but to grow. So,
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it makes people pretty uncomfortable. So uncomfortable to the point where they either like get with it and like really excel in the program, or they get really uncomfortable and they're like, I'm actually not ready for this yet. I'm not ready to face all these things yet, because we go through some pretty deep topics within the program and the mentorship side of things. Okay, I want to go into the daily deliverables for a minute here. And I want to talk about this because everybody that is listening can start to implement this right now today. They don't need a program. They don't need to be a part of my coaching. Like, these are simple activities that I feel everybody could really benefit from. So, okay, for example, the daily journaling. That is one of their daily requirements. Talk to me a little bit about your personal journey of journaling. How has it impacted your life? Were you doing it before? Has it evolved in how you journal? How do you personally journal? Like, just give us all the tips that you have so that everyone that's listening can kind of have an insight to like your experience and then have some tips for themselves as well.
So it started out as kind of a checkbox item.
Mm-hmm.
And quickly I realized like this time is supposed to be intentional. You have the prompts, your gratitude, intentions, excellence, your mantra for the day, a prayer, and then self-reflection. So I quickly realized that I wasn't really dedicating all my attention when I was sitting down to journal. So I became more intentional about journaling. Mm-hmm. And that really made an impact, especially with gratitude. I have never actually practiced gratitude on a daily basis like your program requires. And that helped my mindset shift even more, in situations where before I would be negative about something. I think I actually said this in one of my check-ins, is I switch my mind and like see what positive thing I can find in that situation. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy how much that changes your perspective.
Can you think of an example where maybe you had to do that? I know it's kind of on there. Yeah.
I went for a run one day, and I have this route that I kind of take normally, and there was actually a landslide, I think. So they were fixing the road. So like even pedestrians couldn't walk past it because I thought, it was just blocked for cars. Anyway, so I was kind of annoyed because I had this whole plan set up in my head. And I get to this point and I'm like, okay, there's literally no way past this. I even asked somebody if they had tried to walk like over the dirt, because there's like big construction equipment, like fixing the road. Yeah. And they're like, no, like they'll literally yell at you if you try to like walk over this amount of dirt. And I was like, okay, fine, I have to turn around. Oh. And I think my original plan was just like 2 miles to just run, like without stopping, no walking. And I ended up running like 4 miles because it's like a canyon close to my house. And so instead of going back the way I was going to go, I continued on the road, and I was just like feeling great. And it turned, I was like, see, like if the road had been open, I would have like sold myself short. So
wow, that's crazy. Yeah. Wow. It makes you think about in life when you get closed doors, right? You sometimes focus so much on the closed door that you don't realize that it's actually allowing you to go further in life and to go further towards your goals. So, wow, what a cool practical way for you to get that lesson. You know, it's interesting. Life, the world, universe, God will always give you the lesson that you need, come gift wrapped in different types of wrapping paper, literally all the time. So it's never even about the situation that's happening. That's what I've really realized in my life. It's so much deeper, and sometimes we don't understand it until we look back with perspective. But if we can have the awareness that everything in life is just a learning lesson and we're learning all the time, then we can stop getting so hyper-focused on the details of what's happening on the surface level. And we can stop and say, what is happening right now? What's coming up for me? Right now, what's coming up for me is I'm feeling really impatient and really aggravated. Okay, maybe I'm learning to control my emotions. Maybe I'm learning patience, right? I joke all the time that like, I knew I was an impatient person. I've always known that. My family, we always joke that like, we're just impatient, right? But then I started traveling and I started having to be in airports. And I cannot tell you how many flight delays and changes and like some of the worst airport stories to where you just start laughing because you're like, it's a joke at this point. Like at this point, someone's playing a joke on me. The whole world is watching and they're just dying laughing. Spending nights in the airport, like meeting random strangers. I've met so many people in the airport that like, how are you guys doing? Are you guys still out there? But I just think about like that really did cultivate patience in me to where like I'll give a practical example. Like I used to be that person where a long time ago, if I was like in a really long line, I'd like tap my foot or like almost sigh. And now I think about that and I'm like, that's so much negative energy and it changes nothing. Like for everyone listening, and I know I say this in my program a lot, so you're probably just like, yeah, I've heard this before. But for everyone listening, truthfully, it changes absolutely nothing for you. And it actually like brings your energy to this like lower level negative energy. Even if you don't feel negative, it's not a good energy. It's not a positive. It's not a warm, welcoming energy. And other people around you feel that. So the challenge for me was learning to practice that patience and also learning that like whether I sit there and tap my foot and sigh or I'm smiling and full of gratitude and really thinking positively and bringing that into my life, the line doesn't move any faster or slower. So like, why not enjoy it? Why not choose, okay, how can I enjoy this? And I know it's something simple, but I feel like I'm speaking on it because I feel like there's a lot of people that probably need to hear this lesson. Same thing with like traffic, right? It's like, no matter what we do, no matter how upset we get or whatever, traffic's not going to go any faster than the dead stop traffic. So might as well turn on a song that you enjoy, turn on a podcast like the Evolve with Emily show and get your your jams on or your personal growth on. Sorry, it's a long tangent.
I think on top of that, because I can relate with airports and traffic, I think everyone can. But also realizing what your amount of time to be comfortable is. So like I've started giving myself even more time to get to a place. It's like, I mean, I've kind of learned that with the military too. It's like, if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. It's kind of the thing. And so I think about like, okay, what time do I actually want to physically be there? Like, do I need to account for time for walking from my car to the place, for parking, and then maybe throw in an extra 5 minutes for traffic? So I've learned from past experience, and I built in so much more time, and it makes life way less stressful. Amen. So I think figuring out for yourself what works for you and not necessarily going off other people's like, oh, well, I get to the airport 2 hours early and I'm fine. It's like 2 hours early for you might be
stressful.
Right.
Too much. Like to me, I'm like, no. I need to be, getting things done before the airport. I love that you mentioned that. I think it's such a practical tip that people can start to implement because I realized, and here's the other thing too, people fail to give themselves a proper self-assessment. Meaning they might think in their head that they're this type A, like always on time kind of person. But in reality, when you look at it, like you're always 10 minutes late and like barely getting there. Oh, sorry, I'm running a little late, right? Like every single time. Do you know anyone like that?
Right.
Yeah. And so
I'm not going to mention any names.
Right. Right. But it's like, that's the self-awareness piece, is to say, okay, my actions are actually that I'm always rushing in late and I'm stressed and I have this like anxious energy when I get there because I've been so worried about getting there on time. right? So like you said, building in that time, giving yourself extra time. And I laughed at the 5 minutes for traffic, because being in LA for the last 7 years, you got to add like 30 to 45 extra minutes for traffic just in case, you know?
Right.
So it's very funny, but yeah, I think that's such a good tip. And I think time management is crucial. Some people are living their lives so stressed and so anxious simply because they don't have a good grasp on time management. And so I love that you bring that up. Let's go into the daily deliverable of reading. So one of the daily deliverables is reading every single day, some sort of personal development, something that's going to help you grow and evolve. So do you have any books that you could recommend to people, and tell us your experience about consistently reading? How did consistently reading impact your life?
Consistently reading is really a simple task. I think a lot of people say, like, I don't read, I'm not a reader,
Mm-hmm.
and I would probably say the same, even though I know I enjoy reading. Um, so setting, a goal of like 5 pages a day or 5 minutes is really actually doable. And obviously, if you're reading every day, like, you will eventually get through a book. And I found most times, hopefully the book that I'm reading, I am really into, and then I end up spending more time than I planned to read. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the books that I recently finished is Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins,
Such a
which I
good one.
started that like last year, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't in the right mindset, I don't think, because he's super gung ho, has like a no excuse attitude.
Mm-hmm.
But when I read it this time, I just like couldn't get enough. And the concept that he talks about that is so powerful to me is when he's doing any type of, he mostly talks about physical training, about just pushing past your limit. And it's not, doing some crazy like 24-hour run when you've never done it. Like, he probably did something like that. But like, for most people, he's saying, push one rep past what you absolutely think you can do. And you just do something like that every day, or every time you train, or, you're studying, maybe you can study 5 more minutes, or, and that really hit me, because when you read his story, the things he's done are just incredible. But he didn't start out that way.
Mm-hmm.
He, just little by little kept building on, his goal. And he really talks about how it calluses your mind, which is really awesome, and that's something I'm trying to work on, especially with like lifting,
Mm-hmm.
knowing or asking myself, am I really that tired? Or like, is this just my body or my mind giving up, not my body, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I'm trying to practice, and it's really made an impact on me. That book, Can't Hurt Me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that you mentioned that. Do you ever train with somebody, or do you always train alone?
Alone, I'd say 95% of
Yeah.
the time. If it's with somebody, it's usually cardio or like mountain biking or snowboarding, which I don't really consider a workout. Like,
Right.
yeah. So,
Yeah, I would recommend, if you're able to find somebody that is on the same level as you, same mindset, that can push you, that's the easiest way, right? Because I don't know, I feel like we usually can motivate and empower and encourage people to do a little bit more than they do in themselves. And once they kind of give you that open window to look through and see what you're actually able to do, then you're able to translate that into your training, even when you're alone, right? So even if you were to say, you know what, I'm going to get a personal trainer, I'm going to buy like 4 sessions, I'm going to split it up, and just kind of supplement your actual training with the personal training, and tell them, I really need help, like pushing myself to like another level. That way you train with them, you see where that's at. And now you have a big mirror held up to yourself next time you're training, because you're like, okay, I am sitting here wanting to quit when last time I did so much more, right? And we both know not every day you're going to be able to do the same amount. Some days you have bad or off days, or you feel weaker, not as strong, and that's okay too. But yeah, I think that would definitely be helpful. I love training with people because you guys know me, like I'm going to push you. And I love when they're like, I think I'm going to do this. I'm like, nope, you're going to do this. And then they're like, damn it, I can't unknow this. Like, that's the point.
And actually, as we're talking about this, I thought about sometimes in my past, like when I would be like doing sprints with someone or a run, and like the second somebody encourages me or tries to push me, I shut down. I would shut down.
Oh, no
So like
way.
I'm like, don't encourage me. Like I'm gonna do what I want to do. Like
Oh,
so
I
it
see.
almost inhibited me. But I think now, I think my mindset is different. I think I had to learn it for myself and be able to push myself
Mm-hmm.
to now I think I would be open to like outside encouragement and
Yeah.
actually feed off of that, you know?
That is such a good point. It's such a good point because not everybody is open or receptive to that. So I think that's a really, a good point to make. And what I'm hearing you say pretty often in this is kind of like your mindset before and your mindset now. And it really just goes to show you that your mindset dictates how you experience your life, how you're able to learn from life. Even the book that now you're like, this was so impactful in my life, you weren't open to it back then. Your mindset actually held you back from the amazing lessons that were inside of that book. And that goes for every single person on this planet, right? I think about things that I experienced when I wasn't really ready for it, kind of thing. And I probably didn't get the depth and the width that was actually there for me. And, and that'll always happen. That's like the point in the journey of evolving is the more you grow and evolve, the more you're going to be able to get out of certain things. Right. And to those that seek out the depth and the width and they really want like all of it, they're going to get it, So I love that you mentioned that even with training, because I think that's important to know. Alrighty, let's go on to the daily deliverables when it comes to nutrition and training. So nutrition and training, every single day having some sort of nutrition regimen, and then training was really just activity. So like getting your activity in every single day. Now, how did those go for you? Was nutrition or training, were either of those difficult for you to get in on a daily basis?
Nutrition was definitely more difficult.
What made it difficult?
So I feel like I have a pretty healthy relationship with food. So I didn't want to jump into tracking macros right off the bat, or I was pretty resistant in general and still am, but we can get to that. So I wanted to see how things would go with, adding a lifting routine and basically eating the same. And I used to be vegan, so most of the food I'm used to cooking is vegan. And with this, like after a few weeks, Hannah and I talked about making a protein goal instead of like tracking macros or like writing all my food down. So the nutrition and I think everything in this program for me has been a very slow process, which I think is one of the reasons why I was so successful. So yeah, it started out intuitive eating. Then we built in adding a protein goal just once a day. And then it turned into 3 times a day, which is something I'm still working on. And even just cooking chicken was this huge hurdle for me. And it's kind of a funny story because it took me like a week or two to actually prep chicken. And
I mean, you don't have to eat chicken.
I know. Baby steps, right? I was like, I like shredded chicken. Like, I'll just make shredded chicken. Yeah. And I finally, because like even going to the store to buy chicken, like this is like a foreign concept to me. Like, I honestly think I've maybe bought like beef or chicken like once. Like, it's always been like a friend who like is meal prepping, like helped me cook or whatever. So like for me to go to the store, buy chicken, and then I'm like, what do I do with it? Do I have to like pat it or like wash it? Like,
do I pat it? You have to juggle it, actually. You got to juggle your chicken boobs.
So yeah, so everything was such a foreign concept to me. And then when I finally cooked it, I literally just put it in an Instant Pot and like turned it on for 8 minutes. And then
Awesome.
I told Hannah, I was like, that was literally the easiest thing. And I had a feeling it would be, and I put it off. And so.
That's what we do though, right? Like we create this whole story inside of our head that it's going to be this like big, overwhelming thing. And we just think about it and it gets bigger and bigger inside of our head. And then sometimes it's literally just an Instapot.
Yep.
That's funny.
So currently, I am thinking about tracking macros for a month or two because I've never done it consistently.
Okay.
And I also kind of changed my mindset on that. I think it might have been from the podcast with you and Hannah and Amanda.
Mm-hmm.
Just think of it as like a new goal just for a month, right?
Yeah.
I'm just going to track macros for a month to learn what I can and have a better foundation of intuitive eating, maybe. So that is one of my goals for the future.
I love that so much. And I think it's so helpful. I think maybe not everybody, but like, I think a lot of people would really benefit from tracking for a small period of time, just as an educational, like almost like this educational experiment or trial that you're doing on yourself, right? Of, okay, like I wonder what actually is in all of this food, right? A lot of the times people, again, have this, they fail to like give a proper self-assessment when they're like, well, I eat really healthy. I eat a lot of the good food. But then they don't realize that like they're just eating so much of the good food that it's adding up to a caloric intake that might be a little bit over where you would like to be in regards to your goals. So maybe you're wanting to maintain and you're eating just enough to be in a bit of a surplus. So you're like, why do I keep gaining? I'm eating all this healthy food, right? And so, macros is just a really great way to learn to be consistent on it. And yeah, absolutely. I would say, be consistent on it for at least a month. And then after a month, like give yourself the freedom to be done with it if you want to be done. Or, you can always do macro ranges, or there's so many different things and methods that you can do. But oftentimes it'll give you the education you need to make better choices, moving forward. So I think that sounds like a great next step for you. And I'm excited for that.
Right. So one more thing I wanted to add. Mm-hmm. When I started the program, I purposely didn't make one of my goals to get shredded because I felt like that was too big of a goal for 90 days because I want to build long-lasting habits. Mm-hmm. And so specifically with my nutrition, I would go back and forth and be like, I'm not as shredded as I want to be, but then I would remind myself that wasn't really the goal because I want it to be long lasting. Mm-hmm. Where was I going with that? So with training, like I was very consistent with training, mm-hmm. and I definitely added strength, but I'm not at the body fat percentage I want to be. Mm-hmm. So I was constantly going back and forth of like, you're still making progress. You prepped chicken. Like,
yes.
Really small baby steps to get me to where I want to go. Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
It does. And I've heard you voice that a few times, like in the group coaching calls that we do a couple times a month, how it's just been like not one major thing, not one major shift or aha, but like all the small little things that you think are insignificant that are making such a big impact. And I love your approach to it. I love that your approach wasn't this huge goal that you had to reach in X amount of time, but rather, okay, what daily, habits can I create and new patterns can I create to set me on track for that goal eventually, right? Because that will come with time, and it's so much better if you can have longevity with it and really keep it up well after the program as well. So, okay, let's go into some of the audio mentorship lesson topics because I'm kind of curious, and I think that these are topics that will help every listener, regardless of where they're at. So one of the first ones was excellence versus perfection. And we talk about, the difference between those two because we really wanted to set the tone that we are not demanding perfection because I just honestly believe that it doesn't exist. I believe that people are human and they need to learn how to push through and how to overcome the moments when they aren't perfect. Because, we can be pretty on target for a lot of things, but the truth is we're all going to have a bad day. The truth is we might have an off day. And so learning to bounce back, I think, is really important. but I want to know, what have you learned in regards to this idea of perfection? And what have you learned when it comes to maybe not hitting the mark, maybe not being perfect, right? So what's your experience with that?
I think if you could narrow the program down to one thing, I would say it's this. And I've actually been thinking about this idea a lot because I think most people know this concept, but like actually doing it, like bridging the gap of knowing that you don't need to be perfect and actually following through is what makes all the difference. So yeah, I lost my train of thought, but like I didn't think I would ever get a coach. And like there's so many things in this program with like it was customizable to me. So it's not like I had to start off with this 6-day lifting split that like if you don't do one day, then you've failed, right?
Right.
And I think I kind of started to feel that way with 75 Hard. Nothing against the program, but it started to build all this anxiety in me, and I felt like there was no room for a mess up. And if that's the mentality, then I don't think you'll be successful. And I think the program of AllX, you have, you know, your coach every week. And I would say maybe the first 2 weeks, I had a little bit of anxiety of like, I'm on this program, I have to be perfect. And then I would remind myself that like, it's okay. And I don't know where that came from. I don't know if it was the coaches, you know, but I slowly realized that you just keep going and you put one foot in front of the other. And again, that's a concept I knew before, but didn't actually put into practice.
Yeah. And so similar to when we were talking about earlier, how your mindset wasn't really ready to take everything that you could take from that book. You weren't able to really, you know, get the benefits from that. I actually think that the same is true for where you were at in your own journey with 75 Hard, because I see the way that I see the two programs is I actually see Evolve X as a like precursor to 75 Hard, because 75 Hard does demand perfection on these things, right? So that is such an extreme level of excellence, right? And so for me in my program, I actually offer a place for people who are not ready to do that and who feel like they are always going to be a failure at everything because they have a bad day or they get something wrong, or, you know, because there's a lot of people that will never be ready for that if they don't first have a space and a place where they can come and figure out what to do when you get it wrong. And what's happening is people are now building, it's kind of like these foundation or basic block or basic elements and blocks to these habits that they need to create. And now I guarantee you, people that graduate Evolve X, they're going to have such a better time. And I wouldn't say easy, because 75 Hard is not easy, but they're going to be way more prepared for that level, for that intensity, right? So I think that's kind of the difference, because I think when people are ready for that and they execute really well on those things and they're able to finish 75 Hard, it does create and cultivate like this, just this fighter mentality. But I do believe that some people need this like intro or this like beginner's blocks kind of program. And I believe that that's kind of like what my program Evolve X does, is it allows people to have the experience of, okay, I am missing the target. I am not on my program. Okay, now what? Now what do we do? Because normally I give up. Normally I say I'm a failure. Normally I go back to my self-sabotaging habits. And I really wanted to like meet people right where they were at that step and say, okay, but here's the way. Like, this is the way forward. And it's, you just ate a whole pizza by yourself. Let's have a protein shake before you go to bed, because you still need to get your protein in, right? Like, don't wait till tomorrow. Do what's the next action that you can take right now today to do something positive for yourself. And it's because we go through life with these unconscious patterns and habits and beliefs. And if we aren't ever able to break those, we will never reach the greatness that we are actually meant for. So I think, that's a really big goal of this program, is to teach people grace, not in a self-love, just sit at home and be lazy kind of way. Like, absolutely not. I don't think anyone gets that vibe from this program. But just in a realistic way of like, you may have never had the experience of overcoming when you fail or when you feel like you want to quit, So right now, like, let's learn what that's like. And once you really build that, then you can go on to the next step or the next thing. So I think that's probably how those two connect a little bit.
And something I thought of to set you up for excellence is making goals small enough that you can actually achieve them. Because when I was figuring out what I wanted to do for my lifting split, I decided that 4 days a week, that sounded manageable to me, because I also like to mountain bike and snowboard. So I wanted to feel like I could do both. So once I, was hitting every lift and still being able to do everything else that I wanted to do, I was seeing that making the goal small enough is how you start, and then you can build on that. Because now, towards the end of the program, I was lifting 5 days a week, and even during my workouts, I would be like, I feel like I want to do one more set, or like, I feel like I want to add another exercise, or I'm going to go for a run after this, So I think that's another thing that people can implement, is make the goal as small as you have to. It's like a 10-minute walk. If that's too much, like a 5-minute walk, and just keep doing that until you feel like you want to do more. Like if that takes a week or a month, like either way, you're still making progress. And that was also something that really stuck with me, is if I felt like there was a task too large, I would make it smaller and smaller until it felt doable enough to just like start.
Yeah. I think that's real. I think a lot of people need that. They need it broken down in a digestible manner so they can start to create that positive momentum of achieving something. I think sometimes when it's too big and it's too much, and it can be really overwhelming to people, and they feel like they're not making even the slightest dent, right? Like imagine if they go from no cardio every day to, okay, I'm going to walk for an hour every single day. And maybe for a lot of people that's easy and they can do it no problem. And it's like a checklist thing. The reality is, for some people, like they would really struggle with that. So I love what you're mentioning here, because I think there's a lot of power in recognizing and being really honest with yourself about where you're at. It sounds like a great idea to everybody to just go, balls to the wall, for lack of other words, to just go hard, right from the get-go. Go from, never training, maybe training here and there, to 6 days a week training. But like, are you really going to be able to keep that up, or are you going to burn out in 2 weeks? So I think it's important to recognize, okay, what is my habit? What is my pattern? Normally I'm good and I'm motivated for like 2 weeks, and then I just cannot keep it up. It's so much, and I'm, so tired and so stressed out and overwhelmed and whatever. Okay. Like she's mentioning, like try a 3 times a week program. And maybe that's something you can actually do for 4 weeks. And at 4 weeks, you're like, I kind of want to do a 4th. I'm in this new habit. I'm in this new routine. I'm feeling better. So I love what you're mentioning, because I think everybody really needs to find out what is the proper step that they need to take, and be okay with the fact that it might look completely different to other people.
And on top of that, letting go of the idea that your results will come fast. Like, that's the biggest thing I've had to let go, is just like, be okay with slow results, slow progress, because I do really want these habits to be long lasting.
That's so good. I was at jiu-jitsu this morning, and the owner of the gym, Brian, he was just like talking. He was like, there's no fast track to jiu-jitsu. And I was like, for a second, I was like, oh, I wish there was. And then I thought about it, and I was like, actually, no, I don't, because the journey that it is requiring to even start to learn this is so much, and it's requiring so much consistency, so much dedication, so much intentionality. Like, just, it's requiring a lot. And I know that when something requires a lot of me, it cultivates and creates depth of character and different things that I need. So I actually wouldn't skip the journey. But similar to what you're saying, whether it's weight loss or it's muscle building or learning a new skill like a martial art, it's gonna take time, and there's no fast track. But like, literally, the secret sauce, the key, is literally just showing up and doing the work today. That's it. Every day that you wake up, say, you know what? I'm going to put in the work today. And some days you have a bad training day. Don't grade yourself on a bad day. Some days you have an amazing training day. That's great, right? But like every single day, just being committed to showing up and doing the work, because that truly is when you will all of a sudden, 6 months down the road, look back and be like, wow, if I had focused just on the bad days, I would have given up. But thank God I knew that like this journey was going to consist of the good and the bad. So, I hope people can really grasp that, because I think it'll give them power to just show up for themselves today. We have this every day is day one mentality within the program. I'm curious what kind of mindset shifts that might have helped you make, or like how you live that out in your life, and kind of like what do you tell yourself when you're in a really difficult moment, whether it's in the gym or nutrition, or you're feeling resistant towards something. How does that like play a part in your mindset?
So when I started adding a 5th day of lifting, I struggled quite a bit. I think it was on Fridays, like 3 Fridays in a row. I woke up and was like, man, I really don't want to do this. But I didn't waste any time with getting to the gym. So like I had all these thoughts, and I was like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I could just stay in bed, but like I was up and like brushing my teeth and like figuring out what I was going to wear and like getting like a snack ready. And so I would tell myself like, that's fine. It's okay if you don't want to, but like it was almost like my body and my mind were two separate people.
Yeah.
And my body was like ignoring the thoughts and just like walking to my car and like driving to the gym. And a few times too, I've said, I'll just do the first exercise and then see how I feel. Like if I'm still that exhausted where like I'm literally falling asleep in the gym or something, like, okay, I'll go home. But of course that like never happens. And the one having like today as day one mentality again kind of brings your focus to a smaller goal, like I've never done 12 weeks consistently of lifting or exercise. So I never really focused on that because that's overwhelming. So I would keep making it small again. Like day one, right now, okay, right now I just have to walk to my car. Now I just have to drive to the gym. And on top of that, that kind of relates to like gratitude, right? Like we don't know how long we have, and you don't even know if you have tomorrow. So being thankful for what you can do and like seize the day and do what you can today. That's kind of goes along with that mentality.
Absolutely. I love that you mentioned that, because I think it's so important, especially when it comes to people that have a competition or something that they're looking forward to, which I think is great. Or even if it's like the program, right, where it's like 90 days, I have 80 days left or whatever. Sometimes you get so forward thinking, so focused on the future, that you actually miss out on being fully present in the moment. And I think it's really important to always practice that presence. So I'm curious, have you ever struggled in your life with being present? Like maybe you're in your head a lot, or maybe it's anxiety, or maybe it's thinking about the future. And if so, what are some things that you've done to help you come back to the present moment?
I try to be aware of my presence in general, I think. Yeah, so if I catch myself like thinking about what I have to do this week or tomorrow, or I have tests coming up or anything like that, it's kind of the same strategy. Like, okay, this is starting to get too big, like let me break it down. One strategy I would say is just writing out everything I'm thinking. If or on my phone or anything like that, or sitting in silence for 5 minutes. That definitely like forces you to be present and listen to your breathing and just be in the moment. So my strategies would be writing things down, or even stopping, saying a prayer, things like that bring me back to the present moment.
Yeah. One of the ways I do that as well is in my car, because it's like, okay, we're at home and I work from home. So I'm working a bunch. I'm doing all these things. I can kind of get like my brain's everywhere. Right. And then I get in the car and I'm like, okay, I'm going to drive. And as long as I have time, usually I have time in the car, at least 5 minutes before I need to like actually be inside the place I'm going to. So I'll just stop for a second and I do that same thing. And sometimes I'll just like put my hand on my heart, maybe hand down here on my stomach and just breathe for a second and just say, like, check in, like, hey, like, how are you? What's going on? Like, how are you doing? And sometimes I just like have a little conversation with myself. I'm like, honestly, I'm pretty stressed out. Okay, why are you stressed out? I think I have too much on my plate. Okay, so what are we going to do about that? How can we change that and not continue to live in this cycle and pattern? So sometimes for me, those little like conversations help a lot. So, okay, I want to get into victim mentality versus growth mentality. Have you had experience with victim mentality? And if so, how did you grow out of that? Or what kind of like brought to your awareness that you were in it?
I don't know if I have an example of feeling like the victim, but I feel like I've been pretty self-aware for, I don't know, a while, years, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. And maybe this is something some of my friends could attest to, or maybe like be like, hey, this is something you do that you're not aware of.
I see.
But in most situations, I try to ask myself, like, what could I have done differently in this situation to have a different outcome? Like, what did I contribute? Is there anything else I could have changed? So I try to, even if like your instant reaction is to be like, oh, this person, wronged me
Mm,
or anything like that, I immediately ask, like, what was my part in it? And
that's good.
is there anything else I could have done? And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where that came from.
Yeah, I was going to say, and the reason I ask if you've had experience with it is because I'm like, okay, she either had it and grew out of it, or that's just never been you. I think there are some people that they just never fall into that mindset. And that's kind of how I see you. I just didn't know if it was something that you had like actually grown out of. But it makes sense now. Like, and I think it's just the way that your brain works. You're a very like, logical, straight to the point, like just this is what it is, like honest. So I can imagine you being that way with yourself as well.
And I'll admit that question like made me vulnerable because I'm like, I bet you somebody that knows me is going to listen to this and they can probably think of an example. And I'm open to
Oh,
hearing that feedback.
I love that so much. No, I know. I could tell. That's why I'm like, you don't have to say that, come up with anything if you weren't, but I love that so much. And I think, those are really important questions to ask because it comes down to taking personal responsibility because even if somebody does wrong you, you got to really ask yourself again, like, okay, what is my part in this? And maybe your part in this is the simple fact that you are giving somebody access to you who has already shown you that they don't really deserve it, has already shown you character traits and flaws that would give you red flags, so to speak, to show you that you'd be treated that way. And it doesn't justify anyone's behavior, but it does help you to feel more empowered, right? It's not empowering to say like, they did this to me and this always happens to me, right? That's victim mentality. But to take your power back and say, oh, I allowed access to myself of this person. They then showed their true colors. So I'm making a different decision and that's okay. And really just kind of having that kind of mindset, I think can be empowering and empower you to make different and better choices.
I did think of an example.
Oh, you did?
So I had a friend, we were really close friends throughout COVID. So I thought, and I like poured my whole heart out to her. And at the end of our friendship, she basically like ghosted me with no explanation. And that was very difficult to me because I was like, was I not a good friend? Like, it really like hurt. And I was like, I was 100% myself with her. And I think, I don't know for sure, but I think there's things that she struggles with opening up to people. Like she kind of kind of gives this perception of she's very open and willing to talk. And I realized it was kind of one way. Like she was always there for me when I would confide in her, but it wasn't reciprocal. And I tried not to point the finger because it felt like she wronged me. And then I was like, what could I have done differently? But I do think, at some point there is only so much you can do. And I ended the friendship on good terms. I still let her know that I deeply cared for her and wished the best. And I didn't care what happened. I just wanted her to know that regardless of whether or not we could continue to be friends. And I just had to accept that maybe, it just wasn't the right time, or, she had things that she just couldn't get through with me or had to work through herself.
Again, it's bringing up what you mentioned earlier about the book. Like that just keeps coming up in my mind. Like it almost makes me feel like maybe she, with where she's at in her journey, isn't ready for that level or that depth of friendship just yet. And you were. And maybe there's other things happening too. I have no idea. Just the thoughts that are coming to my mind is, maybe she wasn't ready for the depth of that friendship that you were really ready for and presenting. So, that could be something like that. But, I've experienced that before where someone is just completely ghosted. And I just literally don't understand that because I'm such a straightforward, I think we're very similar, straightforward, logical, honest. Like honesty doesn't hurt, even if it's like, hey, I actually don't really like you anymore. I don't really like hanging out with you anymore. It's like, oh, okay, no problem. Like, thanks for letting me know. At least now I know. But what I've really had to learn in my life, especially with the ghosting, is I literally just say, okay, like, thank you, God. It must be protection. Like I imagine, what if that door did not shut? Like, I know myself, I know my heart is really big, and I would really go into something that maybe I shouldn't be going into. And maybe God's way of protecting is allowing this person to ghost me. Right. And again, it's just, thoughts that I think help me get through those feelings as well.
Yeah. It's difficult, especially when you feel like, I feel like I had so much I could offer her.
Yeah.
And when you want to help someone, I really realized people, if they don't want help, they don't want help. So they have to be willing to.
Yeah. And I feel you on that so much. A part of my job is helping people to, come into their, who they were created to be and to evolve and to grow. And so for me, I definitely, I think I do that a lot. Like I would love to help the people that I love the most. But what I've really realized is that, again, like you can't help people you don't want to help, like you mentioned, but also you really have to look at their behavior. And I believe that if there is actual changed behavior, then there is changed like heart posture as well. And I believe that that is different than somebody who just always says that they want help and they say all the right things, but their actions and how they show up in life and how they respond to life, none of that's ever changing. And I think that is it's kind of like this little cue, because I feel like there's probably people listening that feel similar to us. They want to help their friends and family, comes from a great place. But really being able to recognize like, oh, this is that thing when they're saying that they want help and yet they're just always in the same cycle. And what we can do as people that relate to us is kind of just have an objective look at it and like take a step back, so to speak, and not put those expectations or pressure on yourself or on them, and just be a space of just loving acceptance, accepting them for where they're at. And in some cases, yeah, you may have to step away if it's some sort of like unhealthy environment. But if it's just like a friend or a family member that they keep coming to you with something, you keep trying to help and it's almost hurting you that like they're not taking the help, just really realizing that and then releasing it completely and loving them for who they are, even with them complaining about the exact same boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever for years, just be like, okay, cool. Yep. All right. Have a great, did you want a smoothie? Okay. Bye. Sometimes that's the kind of relationship you got to have with that, because people aren't going to change until they're truly ready, and only if they really, truly want it. And when they do, of course, like you can lend a hand if you need to. So you mentioned, I kind of mentioned in your intro that you are seeking on deepening your relationship with God. I am curious, are you open to sharing how God or your faith became real to you? Like why is God, why is faith a thing in your life? Why is it important to you? What can you share about just your personal journey or testimony? It doesn't have to be long, but just anything that you can share about that.
There was a moment on one of my deployments that I didn't know my level of danger, and that situation kind of pushed me back into my rediscovery of my faith. And it's kind of one of those moments like, okay, if this is it and if you're real, please save me.
Wow.
So that kind of reignited my journey, which was like probably more than 5 years ago. And then more recently, in the last year, I've been faced with possible job issues based on the current climate, and there's a lot of things, I think, in the world in general that can be overwhelming, and I unintentionally turned to God, or I had this like feeling of peace come over me, like when I was in one of my darkest moments, which I think I've been like depressed for like one day. Like it was a quick dip, and then I was like, oh no, we're not going to stay here. And then I like, got out of that, I would say like in one day. And I said, I felt this peace, and I believe it was God, just saying like, everything's going to be okay. Cause this ties into like my identity. Like I previously identified a lot with my job, and I think what led to kind of like the depression was the idea of losing this thing that I identify with so much, which is one of your audio topics.
Yeah.
And coming to terms with the fact that like I would be okay without this thing that I identify so heavily with. And I didn't think I realized how much I identified with my job. So it was a few things that happened all at once, and I felt like that was God like leading me back to him. And then like ever since then, I'm like, if I can feel a peace like that in that moment of such fear and like unknown, like literally everything will be fine, like no matter what happens. And I just, since then, I've just been, very intentional with, building my relationship and like meeting other people who believe. And if I hadn't, I kind of view it as a fork in the road. And if I had gone, left instead of right, like, I feel like that was a very pivotal point in my life, actually. And, I basically was like, put my faith in God and was like, everything will be fine. And everything's been fine since then. And I just have, such a peace and a happiness, and that's all I can really attribute it to.
Yeah. Wow. That's beautiful. And I've heard, friends' testimonies of kind of the same thing where, you get to that moment, that really, really dark spot, and you ask for him to show himself to you, to make himself real to you. And he does. Like he'll always meet somebody who has a really open heart that really, truly wants to know that he's real and that he's there. And oftentimes it comes with the things that accompany his character and his spirit, like peace or joy or, any of the fruits of the spirit, so to speak. So I think it's incredible that you've really found that in your life, because I know, life can be really rocky sometimes, especially with, like you mentioned, the climate of everything going on. And so to have that, it doesn't change any of the circumstances that we experience, but it does change how we show up to them. And it also takes away the power out of our environments and circumstances, because there is a power that is so much greater within us that is producing peace when people would not understand. Like they would give us every excuse to not have peace in our lives, when our lives look crazy, when everything is just a crazy storm around us. And yet we're able to have this like centered peace. And I think it just speaks to the power of God's presence and what it can really do in your life when you are experiencing such really difficult things. And also when you're experiencing amazing things, to know where they came from and to be able to express that gratitude and really not ever take things for granted. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, of course. And one more thing I wanted to add.
Yeah.
People, will be like, well, what if God's not real? Or, and I always say, like, or at least I think, even if he's not real, which I don't believe that, but like my life has been changed. So like, isn't it better to live in happiness and peace than like the alternative? So, that's something I always tell people is it's working, like it's changed me. So I'm going to keep walking this path.
I love that so much because it's so simple, but it's so true, right? Like I think about all of my friends who have had like real life transformations, like, taken them from addicted to drugs and all these things that were going on in their life that produced unhappiness and depression and anxiety. And then now like seeing their transformation of where they're at now, just living such a better, more peaceful life. Like you're mentioning, it's like, okay, well, I'm living a better life, so we're going to have a party over here. If you want to join, you're welcome as well. But yeah, it's just the proof's in the pudding. Like when you have transformation and change like that, you don't really need words, It's like I'm experiencing a whole different life. So yeah, we're going to be over here doing this.
Absolutely.
So, okay, we have had our Evolve X worldwide calls for a long time. And recently we conjoin the two communities into one big Evolve X community. But you've been on these coaching calls for a while. So I want to know from you, what is an impactful part of gathering together and of the community, right? Because we have some really awesome people on those calls. So, how has that positively impacted your life?
So I started the calls in October, I believe. And originally my goal with that was just to meet other people that were like-minded, which I'm also trying to do in person because that's awesome, to be able to go grab a coffee with someone. And I actually think it's just funny how things work out, because I was on the calls for a few months and then joined Evolve X. It's really awesome to hear other people's experiences and be able to build each other up. Like just the other day, there was a girl who, we were saying like her presence is so awesome. And like that I almost kind of felt like she would know that. Right.
I know.
And she messaged me after and was like, you don't know how much that meant to me. Like I'm hard on myself and, and it's just, I don't even know if you can describe like the impact of meeting other people who are working on themselves and are being vulnerable and are, sharing their struggles. And like, we all go through similar things. So, what's the point in hiding behind, I don't know, and not sharing. So just like, I think that's like the whole point of life, honestly, is deep human connection. Like that's what I seek out in all my friendships. And, so yeah, the impact is building that deep human connection and supporting each other.
Absolutely. And I thank you for mentioning that, because I remember when you mentioned that, I was like, duh. And then you saw her reaction. It was almost like, she's like, oh, really? And we're all like, duh. Like you have such a wonderful presence on this call. She always has. I feel like, that kind of just brings to mind for everyone listening and for ourselves as well. Like if you see something in somebody, call it out in them, even if they're not struggling, even if it's just a great day. Just be like, hey, you know what I really love about you is this, or hey, what I really appreciate about you is this, in the way that you show up or whatever it might be. But really saying those things out loud, I think is something that we need to do more often, especially for people that are even for people that are in like leadership positions, or they are usually an encourager. They probably sometimes need that encouraging too. So I love that we were there to kind of build her up in that way, because we've all had our moments on that call of being, up or down or somewhere in between. And that's what's beautiful about community, is being able to come together and support one another and kind of like link arms, so to speak, so that when you are down feeling a little discouraged, you can just get that little like bump up, that little like extra points for the day where you're like, okay, wait, my heart's a little refreshed. Like I didn't get any more sleep. I didn't take a nap. I didn't drink more caffeine, but I'm actually feeling a little bit better. And I do believe it's from that like deep soulful connection, which we are, creating together. So, and you're such a powerful, strong force on that call. And I say that because it's like, you don't have to, like, you don't need to say anything that's super profound, so to speak, or like eloquent or whatever. You literally are just like, so what about this? Like that's how you say it. Like, so have you thought about that? And we're all just like, what did you say? Oh, I think I wrote it down. Didn't you say something on the call that oh yeah. I wanted to say this on the podcast. So I literally wrote this down in my notes, and we're going to end the show here because we're going a little over, but this is important. Everybody needs to hear it. We were talking about discouragement, and I feel like I should just like let you talk about discouragement because it was so good. Do you remember what you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically the question was like, when do you feel discouraged and how do you handle that? And I was sitting there while everyone else was talking, and I was like, I honestly can't remember the last time I felt discouraged, and maybe I'm confusing it with a different emotion, but like, I just ask myself, if I'm disappointed about something, or, I didn't get the score on the test that I wanted, it's like, okay, did I do the work or did I not? And I think I try to be brutally honest with myself. So I really don't get discouraged. I'm either like, well, you didn't deserve that. You didn't put in the work, or you did and you got what you worked for.
That's amazing. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's so simple, but it just like cuts out all the BS. It's like it clears out the whole room, and you're like, here, you literally just have two options. Like you either did the work or you didn't. So I love that you say that. And I definitely just wanted to mention that on today's show.
One more thing I wanted to add that you kind of segued into is just verbalizing how you feel. It's like in any situation, I mean, maybe not any situation, but I think, going back to the girl we were talking about is, if she verbalized like, oh, I'm hard on myself and I don't feel like I have good presence, we obviously would have been like, what?
Yeah.
And so like in relationships and work environments and anything, like I try and do that more often than not. And it's crazy the impact it'll have, even just being like, I feel anxious right now. And you just like say it, and then people can like meet you where you are instead of hiding behind, because that's not really a normal thing, I don't think, is literally just saying how you're feeling.
Yes.
And then life and conversations are so much easier.
Yes. And what it does too is it allows people to not take things personally. So I actually did this with Jess, my assistant, literally yesterday. Like I came home after training in the morning, and like I was just exhausted, like so exhausted that I was kind of just like this, that, yes, like not really like myself. And so I just said it. I was like, hey, I'm feeling this way, but deep inside, I'm really happy. I just want you to know that like I'm happy, and I hope you're not taking any of my lack of emotion, like just nothingness, personally. And she was like, oh no, I get it. Like, I was feeling that way, whatever. So I, have experience with what you're talking about. And it does, like, it provides for a deeper relationship too, right? Because imagine if we never mention anything. Imagine if we never mention like, hey, I'm pretty stressed out right now. They'll never be able to meet you where you're at. And they also might take things personally. They might think that it's about them. They might think, oh, I knew that she was mad at me, or, whatever it is, because people are always creating these stories in their heads. So I think that is something that is so valuable, is just like that honest truth. and allowing people to show up for you. Because for me, if someone tells me that they're anxious, I'm like, perfect. Like, let's go meditate, or let's go walk, or, hey, I know you were about to do that, but I'll actually go do it. Why don't you take a second for yourself? Like we can really show up for each other in that way. So thank you for mentioning that, because I think it's really important.
I do too. And it's almost always never what you think.
Yeah.
So if, you think somebody's mad at you or something, you can just be like, I feel like you're mad at me. And then they're probably not mad at you. And you can just avoid, an issue that didn't be an issue.
Yeah, so true. All right, Trish. Well, today has been amazing having you on the show. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for inviting me on.
Of course. Is there anything that we didn't cover, or any last thing that you felt like you wanted to share before we end?
One thing I'll add, just something that I noticed from the program, is I'm able to bounce back a lot quicker. So like if I ate a cookie at lunch, before I would be like, oh, I'm going to restart tomorrow. So just I've been able to shrink the time from mess up to like getting back on track. And that's like so powerful.
Yeah, the bounce back is something I think everybody needs to learn, because once you do, it's not that you won't ever mess up, but you will get right back on track, and your longevity and your consistency and your results really reflect what your bounce back looks like or not.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. All right, guys, you know the drill. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a favor and share it on your Instagram stories, or maybe text it to a friend. You can tag both myself and Trish. All of her information will be below. So if you'd like to follow her on Instagram, send her a DM, let her know what you thought about today's episode. It is always encouraging to hear how your message and your story has impacted somebody else. So please do that for her. Don't forget to tag the Evolve with Emily podcast page on Instagram. It's at Evolve with Emily podcast. All right, guys, I will see you in the next episode of Evolve with Emily. Bye.